So, to an áthar storm a bhean seo nov, chun labhart faoin scéal mór spreagúil a tháinig amach San Francisco le bliain anuas. Is actually mór faoi láthair ach I gceann cúpla bliain. Tá méid ag súil leis an aisling sin a buint amach trí inad nua Gaeilge a thógáil ag car Naomh Prontius. I'm pleased to be here this morning to talk to you today about our very ambitious project in San Francisco that has been developed in the last year or so. It's a dream right now, but in a few short years we hope to expect to realise that dream and build a new Irish centre in the city of St. Francis. So the proposed redevelopment of the San Francisco United Irish Cultural Centre is something of a feel-good story that has come out of the pandemic. And in fact, as you'll see in a few moments, this was well underway before the pandemic. Again, I'm here this morning on behalf of a multitude of volunteers and supporters back in San Francisco. I have a wonderful board of 14 other extraordinary people who are forces of nature and have proved that with this new vision we have for the future of Irish arts and culture and the Irish American community and beyond in San Francisco. For those in our international audience and for people who are very much East Coast centric, we're here on the West Coast of the United States. More specifically, we're on the southwest side of the peninsula of San Francisco, if you've ever been. The sunset, this is looking north towards the Golden Gate Bridge, Pacific Ocean. We're right there at the edge at 45th and Wawona. Downtown is to the right, and predominantly most of this area was built in post-World War II. Prior to that, it was predominantly sand dunes. It's an area of the city where the Irish flocked out of places like the Mission and Noy Valley after World War II, when new developments allowed new communities to be developed out here. So the Irish Centre is there on the west side of the city, across the road from the San Francisco Zoo. Now, with this is what the present-day Irish Centre looks like. It's almost a 50-year-old building. Extends about 2 stories. It's about 20,000 square feet. But there's lots of changes happening in the neighbourhood. As you'll know, there's a housing crisis in most major metropolitan areas across the United States. In an effort to reduce that crunch, there is plans in San Francisco to build up high-density housing in commercial corridors. The Irish Centre is just in the foreground there to the left. And there's a proposed new building across the street extending up 12 stories, 400 units. This is a bird's eye view of the proposed new building in San Francisco. It extends 6 stories above ground and 2 stories subterraneously. 100 going from 20,000 square feet to 120,000 square feet, so an order of magnitude increase in square footage in terms of what we can actually do in the building. One of the biggest concerns we have in San Francisco right now in the Irish Centre in the past couple of years is we don't have enough space for everything we want to do. So a little short history as to how we got to where we are with this ambitious aspirational plan to rebuild the Irish Centre. The Irish Centre came about in the late 60s, early 70s when a group of very energetic and resourceful Irish people, for the most part, and some Irish Americans, came together and put $120,000 together to buy a site for a new Irish Centre. There was a previous Irish Centre. It was called the Knights of the Red Branch. It was down at 7th and Mission. Big mass movement away out of the downtown area into the western suburbs or western area of San Francisco back in the 60s and 70s. The Irish Centre took about 18 months to build. There was a massive volunteer effort. There's a lot of work and a lot of human energy that is put into a lot of our Irish cultural centres, not just in the running of these places, but also in the construction and the establishment of these facilities. Huge community effort, with about 1,000 charter members back in the early 70s, so it started construction in 1973 and ended in 1975. A lot of people we can recall give a lot of time, talent and treasure. That's something you hear at board meetings a lot, and especially in San Francisco as we set off on this new ambitious plan. So the Irish Centre opened in March of 1975 as a 501c7 private club. Very important to note that was how the club was established, not a 501c3 which came later. So it became a destination for the Irish for the past 5 decades. A wonderful servant to the community. Everyone can attest to attending a wedding, a funeral, life event, memorials, music concerts, fundraisers and dances at the Irish Centre. So it's definitely the heartbeat of everything that's all things Irish in San Francisco, and as I say, it has been for the last 5 decades. So how does something as strong as that Irish Centre, how does it fall in hard times? Well, of course, with the passage of time, we do hear things like, oh, the Irish Centre is dated, it's outdated, it's tired, it's antiquated, and somebody from British Columbia told me one time, man, this place is retro. So it's a real throwback. I mean, it was a state-of-the-art facility back in the early 1970s, and, you know, at the time it was the primo location for all things Irish. But of course, with the passage of time, there's been very little work done to the building. We have an aging building. It's right there at the Pacific Ocean. Not a lot of the materials, HVAC equipment on the roof is weatherized, so much of it is reduced to iron oxide. Rust, for those of you who don't know what that is. We have, of course, plumbing and electrical issues in the building, and of course the roof was recently put on about 20 years ago, and we've been managing to prevent major leakages. So one very important thing happened about 5 years ago. The membership decided to change from a 501c7 to a 501c3 public charity. So the people who originally were the charter members all owned a little piece of the property, and they surrendered that to a 501c3 public charity. Now, this was in an effort to sustain the Irish Centre. We would get an executive director in who would, you know, solicit financial support from foundations, government agencies, and private donations. That executive director lasted 1 year. It didn't work out. Unfortunately, economic headwinds, the banqueting facility and the bar restaurant facility had very much reduced economic activity. And the writing was on the wall. When you're spending more money than you're taking in, then you're running into a major financial crisis. Without much notification, the Irish Centre closed abruptly at the end of 2018. And I can't imagine, I remember speaking passionately at the night when it was disclosed that the Irish Centre was going to be closed. I said, how can this happen? There was no canary in the gold mine telling us that there's something seriously wrong. So how do you go from a closed facility where nobody has any interest in keeping it going to now proposing a $60 million rebuild, although with recent inflation, that number is going to go north of $60 million. But again, 60 million, 70 million, 80 million, all those things are numbers. So how did the genesis of the Irish Centre 2025 project come about? I mentioned this is well underway. The recovery at the centre was well underway by 2019. We had about 15 months of a head start on COVID. So in 2019, we developed kind of a volunteer model. All the staff were released. The chains were essentially on the doors of the Irish Centre. We took them off and opened up. It costs about $20,000 a month to run a 20,000 square foot facility in San Francisco. So we're hemorrhaging money all the time if you're not having the doors open. So in 2019, we actually ended the year in the black. If we were a Fortune 500 company, I'm sure we would have all got massive bonuses. But again, all volunteers, a tremendous amount of human energy to keep it open for all what we call the PGA majors. Put on an event and make sure we're going to make money at it and encourage our membership to keep paying their dues. So the recovery was well underway by the end of 2019, and early 2020, we're now going to expand our programming. We had a huge slate of events planned for March of 2020. I'll just mention the rebuild again because I use this a lot. Rescue, recovery and rebuild. The impact of COVID was pretty dramatic. We were going to celebrate 45 years on 45th Avenue. Marketing executives here in the room would be delighted to be promoting 45 years on 45th Avenue. You couldn't develop a script for this. However, it wasn't all what we had planned it to be. We were shut down by the Department of Public Health in San Francisco on Sunday, March 12th, 2020. This was a massive blow to our annual budget because, as you know, St. Patrick's Week is a huge week of festivities and activities, and we generate a lot of our annual revenue from those activities. Like every other charity, this is one thing I've learned as being a board member and more recently VP and president of the Irish Centre. When you're in the business of being a charity, don't be afraid to be asking for money all the time. Just be transparent and making sure that it's being money well spent. So we raised $160,000 during COVID. as part of an appeal. People were throwing money at us, so we developed a couple of new enterprises. We talk about innovation and pivoting and trying to make ends meet with a closed facility. We opened up Wawona Gates, which was our outdoor dining experience. We also developed an Irish shop, and all these tended to bring people back into the Irish Centre. They hadn't a lot of places to go, and so they helped us to keep us going. What did this do? This reinvigorated our membership like you wouldn't believe. Volunteer supporters came out in their droves, hundreds of people. They had nothing else to do except go to the Irish Centre and spend a few hours helping us out. Membership doubled, our donors came out. We did all kinds of things at Wawona Gates. We had pancake breakfasts. We were able to celebrate St. Patrick's outdoors. We had jazz. We brought back Irish music. We brought back Irish dancing. I built a little stage in the corner. They said, Liam, what are you doing? $600 for a stage? Are you crazy? I said, it'd be crazy not to. They have no place else to go. So the St. Patrick's appeal, at the end of 2020, I became VP, and eventually in 2021, I became the president. They said, Liam, you've bought loads of money now. What are you going to do? So I looked at the roof. We wanted to show the membership we were going to do something constructive. I said, let's look at the building integrity. You know, earthquake country, you've got to make sure it's going to stand up on the next big earthquake. So we looked at putting solar panels up to reduce our carbon footprint and just save money. So I solicited information or help from people in the community to come in and let's talk about what we could do at the Irish Centre. We had now been in the black for over 2 years, and we were looking at maybe doing several things. And some of the building options that came out of the meetings we had with motivated individuals, contractors and community partners was one, do we remodel and add another floor to the Irish Centre? Do we sell the building and move elsewhere, start over with a rebuild, or D, no action? The thing that gathered most interest was actually the rebuild. The remodel, not so much. We could raise $5 or $10 million and bury it in the walls, in the ceilings and in the floors, and no one would ever see it. It would still be the same Irish Centre. We wouldn't have enough, we wouldn't gain another extra square foot of programming space. God bless the Irish dancers. We have 6 Irish dancing schools now operating out of the Irish Centre. Pre-COVID, 0. So there's appetite in the community, and we can rent to those organisations and partners because the appetite is there. We have an expanding cultural programming facility, Irish music, Irish drama. We've had successful Irish summer camps, and this is all about engaging the juveniles. Today's juveniles are tomorrow's seniors. Think about sustainability, get them on the conveyor belt early. We don't have enough, of course, space for our collections or exhibits that we have at the centre. Teaching our kids programs, you know, the library is jam-packed with all kinds of ephemera and books, 3,000 titles, books stacked on top of each other. We had an exhibition which was wonderful, an Irish dancing exhibition that told the history of Irish dancing from 1850 to the present day. And that was a wonderful success. We brought all kinds of people out of the woodwork and collected an awful lot of cultural treasures as part of that. And so we have lots of space to still needed to house all that stuff in physical exhibitions. So with the building group, we worked with a small boutique San Francisco firm, husband and wife team, Stu the Obena. They had done some work a few years ago in terms of repurposing what we could do at the centre. So with their input, the consensus was to build a new building. It was essentially an attempt to build an iconic flagship for Irish arts and culture on the West Coast, but more importantly, a hub for the community. You can see that we're surrounded not by tall buildings, but a lot of low-density housing, and so we have a lot of Chinese, Mexican, and Filipino in the neighbourhood. So we're looking beyond Irish America to sustain this building. So the new building would contain what we call the St. Patrick's Room. You saw that earlier. Physical and digital galleries, a new library, a museum, classrooms for kids programs, non-profit offices. This is the St. Patrick's Room, can hold up to 800 people. Again, wonderful space for drama, music, and hosting local and international artists from Ireland. The library and museum, of course, would fulfil our need to showcase all the wonderful things that people deliver to the Irish Centre in storage boxes. Of course, we talk about activating the building. What are the financial engines behind the big Irish Cultural Arts Centre on the West Coast? And one of those is, of course, something like a swimming pool. Difficult to build, easy to build, difficult to maintain, but it drives membership. Economic sustainability, sports gym, of course, another financial engine that would attract membership and keep the building going. We don't have to talk too much about restaurant and hospitality facilities. That's a no-brainer. I will say, though, that the sensitivity of the old building is included in the new with the incorporation of some of the physical attributes. As you can see, these glue lamps in the Emerald Bar, they're in the St. Patrick's room right now. But we'll repurpose some of that stuff to get you know, all these people who built the building, original building, on our side, so to speak. Again, the lobby and interests them. Okay, so a landmark building at the corner of 45th and Wawona. Lots of people want this to happen. Here's all the local endorsements. We've got all the local politicians, from the mayor down to the local supervisor. What are the recent updates? We've been busy fundraising. We haven't a fully developed capital campaign yet, but we have $12 million raised. We finished a feasibility study on March 2nd, which basically tells us that the building can wash its own face. Build it and they will come. We've been fortunate enough to get some funding from the Irish government through the Strategic Diaspora Grant Programme at the end of last year. Here we have Ambassador Mulhall giving me $100,000. I always like getting those checks. We're in planning. So we cut a check for $542,000 for the City and County of San Francisco to open our plans, essentially open the PDF. So we cut that check in February. We're under environmental review at the moment. Of course, we're always lobbying, and any Irish government minister or anyone related to the Irish government, we do make it a point to go and seek them out here. Minister McGrath, Minister for Public Expenditure, visited the consulate in San Francisco. Minister Martin. Basically, everyone wants to know what's the timeline, Liam? When are you going to get this thing done? Of course, with the money in place, we will commence construction as early as 2023, and hopefully by the end of 2025, we would have the new building in place. And I'll take the spring of 2026. So thank you. We're going to play a short video on the 3D fly-through of the new building.